Good afternoon, everyone. Just gather everyone's attention here. We're about to get started. Okay, so welcome to the Planning Advisory Committee meeting of November 30th, 2022. I'd like to welcome everyone in attendance today. And of course, for those of you who are familiar, we have a new Planning Advisory Committee for the new term of council. So joining us today, we have Mayor Elmsley, Councillor Warren, Jason Willick, Pat O'Reilly, Deputy Mayor Richardson, Mike Barkwell, Andrew Vale, and then today, Director of Development Services, Richard Hawley is with us, and then myself, I'm Joel Watts. I'm Deputy Clerk for the City of Kawartha Lakes, and the Recording Secretary for the Planning Advisory Committee. Now, according to this committee's terms of reference, at the first meeting of the Planning Advisory Committee for this term of council, the first order of business is to appoint a chairperson to conduct today's meetings and for the future meetings for this year and 2023. After 2023, a new chair and vice chair will be appointed at the first meeting of each year. Now, the role of the chairperson includes the responsibility to chair the meeting, ensuring the meeting is conducted as listed on the agenda or by resolution if it's decided to move an item on the agenda, ensuring meetings are conducted in accordance with the Planning Act and the city's procedural bylaw, calling for pecuniary interest when listed on the agenda, and noting that it is up to the individual committee member to determine whether or not they have a pecuniary interest, and ensuring all members of the committee, visiting staff, and members of the public are treated with respect. Once the chairperson has been appointed today, they will conduct the appointment of the vice chair, who will serve as the chairperson in the absence of the chair. I will now call upon the members of the committee 3 times for nominations for the position of chair. So firstly, I call upon the members of the committee to put forward a nomination for the position of chair. Councillor Warren?
I move that Andrew Vale be the chair.
Committee member Andrew Vale has been nominated. Andrew, do you consent to the nomination?
I do, thank you.
All right, I call upon the members of the committee a second time for a nomination for the position of chair. I call upon the members of the committee a third and final time for the position of chair. I declare that committee member Andrew Vale is appointed by acclamation as chair of the Planning Advisory Committee. You can please come forward, bring your name tag with you, and assume your position as chair and conduct the meeting and the appointment for vice chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Joel. So we will carry on. I will firstly call upon the members of the committee to put forward a nomination for the position of vice chair. Member O'Reilly.
I would nominate Pat Warren, Councillor Pat Warren.
Thank you. Councillor Warren, do you consent? Thank you. I will call on the members of the committee a second time for nominations to the position of vice chair. I call on the members of the committee a third and final time for the position of vice chair. Seeing none, I declare that Councillor Warren is appointed by acclamation as vice chair of the Planning Advisory Committee. The vice chair will assume the role of the chair in the absence of the chair. Okay, so we need a motion to accept Mayor Elmsley, seconded by Mike Barkwell. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay, so we'll carry on with today's business. Could I please have a motion to adopt the agenda as circulated? Member Willick, seconder, Councillor Warren. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. Is there any declarations of pecuniary interest at today's meeting? Seeing none, we'll move into public meeting reports. As required under the Planning Act, a public meeting is being held prior to the committee making a recommendation on these applications. The purpose of this public hearing is to allow the committee to gather information on the applications before us, to hear those wishing to make oral submissions on applications, and to allow the committee to ask questions of the applicant, interested parties, and staff. Everyone who makes a presentation at this meeting is requested to state their name for the public record. In the interest of time, the committee respectfully asks that you keep your presentation to no more than 5 minutes. When called, please either unmute yourself and turn on your video or come to the podium and press the speak button. All right, we're going to move right into item 3.1, an application to amend the City of Kawartha Lakes official plan at 96 Kawartha Lakes Road 30, Verlum. Ian Walker, go ahead.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. I'd just ask the Deputy Clerk if he can allow screen sharing and I can share a few slides with you, or alternatively, he can put it up on the board there in the...
You should be good, Ian. Thank you.
Okay. There we go. Okay, thank you. Okay, so should be able to see the location map here on the screen. So this application is an official plan amendment that would allow the severance of 2 new residential lots from this existing lot of record in former Verlum at the intersection of County Road 30 and Hickory Beach Road. On here you have the air photo, which is turned sideways. So this is north on the left side of the screen, east on the top. You have 3 existing lots that were taken off of this larger property back in, I believe, the 1970s. I don't have the exact history of this property, and there are a couple of residential lots as well on the east side of Hickory Beach Road, so 5 lots all in close proximity to each other. This application is proposing to take the 2 lots off up here at the northeast corner of the property closer to Hickory Beach Road. This is the proposed severance sketch here with lots A and B proposed. And this official plan amendment would allow for those 2 consents to take place. The existing zoning is such that it does not have the same lot area in terms of agricultural properties. This application had been circulated in accordance with the Planning Act. The revised notice had been sent out in September, early October, advertising this meeting, as the original Planning Advisory Committee meeting was to be scheduled for October 12th, but the city could not fulfill all the requirements for meeting the requirements for advertisement. So it was placed on this agenda. This application was circulated in accordance with the Planning Act. It requires a minimum circulation of 120 meters. However, in accordance with council's direction, it was circulated to all landowners within 500 meters of the subject property. Since writing the report, I have received 1 comment from the public in objection to this application. Their concern is the impact on agricultural land and what impact these residential lots would have on the neighborhood. And so they are not supportive of it. I have also received comments just this morning. I had received them from our economic development officer, noting that they were not in support of the severances, which would also impact on future agricultural uses in this area. Staff are recommending that the application be referred back to allow the applicant and the owner an opportunity to amend the application to try to find a resolution that may be more in keeping with what could be supported in that area. Certainly, we are analyzing this proposal in the context of updated provincial policy, which was released in 2020, which does allow some what we call locally appropriate lot creation in rural areas. But I will also note that this property has been flagged as being a candidate for being prime agricultural in the agricultural system mapping that the province released in accordance with the growth plan in 2018. That mapping was released. So to date, the city has not considered policy amendments in the context of what is locally appropriate. So each application that comes forward will be identifying what they believe to be their case. And I will turn it over and leave it for any questions. And I believe that the applicant, Bob Clark, is also here to make presentation and provide an answer to any questions as well. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ian. Committee, do you have any questions of Ian at this time? Member O'Reilly?
Thanks very much for you, Ian. Could you just elaborate a little bit more around the prime agricultural land? I know it's proposed, very familiar with the area. It's very close to the rock. Most of the land up there is pasture land. So I'd be very surprised that going forward that it would be considered prime agricultural land. Would you have a comment, or should I wait and ask Mr. Clark as well?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Pat O'Reilly. In regards to that, the province did look at so basically what they looked at when they did their agricultural system mapping is they looked at all the existing prime agricultural areas. They looked at other areas that were agriculture but designated rural in our official plan. On that basis, they're considered to be class 4 to 7 soils. Certainly, it may depend on how you view prime agricultural land. I would probably defer to our agricultural officer to speak a little bit more to it, as Kawartha Lakes does have a lot of class 4 agricultural land based on the land classification system. So there are some class 4 lands that I guess could be considered possibly prime agricultural versus rural. And so I think it's in some of these areas where when the province took a look at their mapping, they said there might be potential here. The city will, through our official plan update, which will be forthcoming in the next couple of years, be looking at things such as a land needs assessment. We will also be looking at agricultural capability of all the lands in the city. The main thing that prime agricultural takes into account is not necessarily whether there, all the existing lots of record that are out there, but it looks at, and not just specifically soils either, but it kind of looks at the area as a whole and how it can support agriculture. So you may end up with non-farmable lands in a prime agricultural area. You will, for those of you who are quite familiar with our official plan, you will note a lot of the lands around Lindsay, former Mariposa Township, parts of former Manvers, a lot of Ops, parts of former Emily in the south. A lot of those lands are prime agricultural. Usually it's looking at larger tracts of land that can be used for agricultural purposes, higher class soils. But these are flagged more as candidate areas. So it's, again, something that we would take a closer look at through that process.
Any further questions of Ian at this time? Councillor Warren?
Yes, through you. You talked about locally appropriate. Is there going to be a policy coming forward about locally appropriate, or is it always a one-off that the planning folks look at each time?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Warren. At this time, every application that would come forward would have to look at providing their own assessment of whether they think it's locally appropriate. So in this instance, Bob Clark has provided a planning justification report, and in his opinion, this is what he considers locally appropriate. Planning staff are disagreeing with that interpretation. But again, this is an interpretation and it will ultimately be up to council to decide. When we do look at updating our official plan, we will need to take into account what council considers to be locally appropriate, and planning staff through that process will be making recommendations as far as policies as to what we consider to be local appropriate areas that are locally appropriate for rural development versus other areas that perhaps are not locally appropriate.
Any further questions of Ian at this time? Okay, seeing and hearing none, does the applicant, owner, or their agent wish to speak to the application? Go ahead, Mr. Clark, we can see you.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, I certainly appreciate where staff is coming from with regard to their intention to protect and prime agricultural land. It's my opinion that, and based on the rationale which we submitted, that although staff seem to assert that this is predominantly an agricultural area, early in our report, we make the assertion that the area does not qualify as a prime agricultural area. And that's despite the fact that on the CLI mapping, it is identified as Class 1 lands, which I suspect is one of the reasons why the province have identified it as a potential or a prime agricultural area. But we have, through our reports, actually made a series of site visits, and the lands themselves are very shallow. There's evidence of stones, rocks, and boulders in the area. And on that basis, our classification of these lands would be Class 4. Now, this is not unusual. The CLI mapping is based on soils information. These lands are identified as a particular soil type. And in some areas, it is Class 1, but in this area, it's Class 4. And I believe Ian actually mentioned that there are areas that are Class 4 lands within this area. But it's our opinion that not only is this immediate area that we're looking at Class 4, but there is a larger area here, which is Class 4. And therefore, in our opinion, it does not qualify as a prime agricultural area. The staff report also suggests that moving the proposed consents to the south, to the adjacent 5 lots that are in the south, could be considered. But we have submitted a natural heritage evaluation, and that natural heritage evaluation indicates that the lands around those 5 residential lots are actually wetlands. And therefore, it wouldn't be possible to extend those 5 lots into a larger cluster because of the natural heritage features which are in that immediate area. And I believe Ian also mentioned that the provincial policy statement indicates that there are the provisions for residential lots in rural areas. They have to demonstrate that they are compatible with the rural landscape. And it's our opinion that these are compatible with that landscape. They have to indicate that they can be sustained on rural service levels, and we've provided that information, and that they don't adversely affect the protection of agricultural land. And it's our opinion that these severances do not affect the protection of agricultural land. First of all, they are not themselves prime agricultural land. And then based on the natural heritage evaluation, the lands around them are natural heritage features which are subject to high water table. And therefore, this is an area that we believe would not qualify as prime agricultural land. So I believe that they meet these tests. There is a concern about limitation in livestock development by the establishment of these residential lots so that they would comply with the MDS separation distance. And our site visit suggests that there is limited opportunity for livestock facilities in the immediate area. And therefore, it's unlikely that there would be large livestock facilities which would be impacted by this development. The lands themselves it's suggested that they would be appropriate for grazing. But the experience of the farmer who attempted to graze livestock here found that it was very ineffective. They had to supplement their feed stock in order to maintain livestock grazing on these lands. And therefore, in my opinion, this has limited ability to support cattle on this location. I also wanted to raise the provincial policy statement, policy number 1.1.5.2 sub C, which allows residential development that is locally appropriate. And Ian has already referenced that. And our report, I would suggest, does make an evaluation of the fact that the development being proposed here is locally appropriate. I understand that the rural designation in the existing official plan only allows surplus farmhouses and residential lots for retiring farmers. I'd suggest that the provincial policy statement itself does allow limited residential uses on the subject lands, and I've already reviewed the criteria. It's my opinion that the proposed official plan will allow these residential uses and that they are appropriate and in compliance with the provincial policy statement. I note and agree with the staff report that the proposed residential uses are in full compliance with the zoning bylaw. And the staff report also suggests, as I've already alluded to, that the lots be located to the southwest corner. I don't believe that is in the best interest of the natural heritage features. In summary, it's my opinion that the proposed official plan amendment will make it possible to develop residential lots in a location which is not good farmland and is sufficiently separated from the adjacent natural heritage features to avoid any impact on these features, and that the proposed lots provide a good location for residential development, which meets the tests for residential development set out by the provincial policy statement. I'd be pleased to answer any questions that you may have. And thank you for the opportunity to present.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Committee, any questions of Mr. Clark at this time? Okay, seeing and hearing none. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak to this application? Anyone from the public wishing to speak to the application? Going to call a third and final time. Anyone from the public wishing to speak to the application? Okay, seeing and hearing none. At this point, the public meeting on this matter has concluded, and committee, after considering the comments provided, what is your recommendation to council? Mayor Elmsley.
The recommendation as printed, that it be referred back to staff.
Okay, motion from Mayor Elmsley to refer back to staff for further information. Is that a second from Councillor Warren? Any discussion? Member O'Reilly?
Thank you very much. I'll speak against the recommendation at this point. I was thinking of the alternate recommendation of sending it forward to council. Based on the following information we heard today, I respect staff's report and whatever, but originally they were asking for 4 lots. They've cut it down to 2 lots, and I believe that I'm very familiar with that area. We're in the farm tile drainage business for a number of years. This land, as well as been spoken, could potentially, seeing it's class 4, could be potentially primary agricultural land, but it's very close to the rock. It's just basically grazing land, and I think if there's a case as Mr. Clark has made, I think it's more appropriate at this time that to move forward with the information we have, and I'd speak against the motion at this time.
Councillor Warren?
Yeah, I'd like to hear back from staff about the wetland and natural heritage features that Mr. Clark talks about, in that you can't move the lots to that area. So I would really like to hear back from staff on that. So that's why I'm second the resolution.
Through you, Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
I think they wanted the original lots down close to the wetland, but now the new lots are in the high dry area by comparison. Is my understanding. Maybe staff can clarify. I could be wrong, and maybe Richard could clarify that, or Ian?
I thought they wanted to be together.
Through the chair, yes, we had originally felt that the lots should be all together. They came in with a proposal for the lots separated out. So I guess we're looking to sort of see if there's, if they can be pushed down any further, but we'll have to do that final evaluation.
Any further discussion? All right, seeing and hearing none, calling the question. All in favor? That motion fails. Member O'Reilly?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. I'd give you the alternate recommendation number 2, that the planning advisory direct staff to prepare, to amend the City of Kawartha Lakes official plan and 96 Kawartha Lakes Road 30, Burlum Fisher application D01-2022-006 be received, and the planning advisory committee direct staff to prepare a bylaw to implement the requested official plan amendment to be referred to council for adoption, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute any documents required by the approval of this application.
Is there a seconder for that motion? Deputy Mayor Richardson. Any discussion?
I'll just be brief. I think I've already spoken to it. So this, if there's any further questions you wish to, I think there'll be an opportunity at coming to council to speak to it. So I think it'd be a great experience for the new council.
Any further discussion? Calling the question, all in favor? And that carries. Thank you. All right, that brings us down to item 3.2, Plan 2022-072, an application to amend the Oak Ridges Moraine Zoning Bylaw 2005-133 at 851 Bailey Duff Road, Manvers. And I think we've got Ian, you're up again.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Hold on while I just share the screen here. So we have a property on Ballyduff Road at the northeast corner of Ballyduff Wild Turkey in former Manvers. We have received 2 applications. One is for a zoning bylaw amendment to facilitate, in this case, another consent application. The city has recently received and reviewed and deemed complete the companion consent application for this proposal. The application, again, was circulated in accordance with the Planning Act, signposted on the property. All landowners within 500 meters have been notified by mail. And so just to very kind of quickly go over this here, what you can see here is actually a map showing the larger area with some lands identified as the Fleetwood Creek Natural Area to the south of Ballyduff Road and as well to the east. Those are owned by the Ontario Heritage Trust and kept in a natural state in perpetuity. The landowners here of 851 Ballyduff Road have had a conservation agreement on their property with Kawartha Land Trust for a number of years. This map here is from 2011, showing the various trail systems throughout the 2 properties. The second property being this property, part of Lot 16, Concession 6, and part Lot 17, Concession 6. So these trail systems through here. The landowners of 851 have already donated this portion of the lands to Kawartha Land Trust. The city actually owns an unimproved road allowance through between 851 Ballyduff Road and this property. And as such, Kawartha Land Trust was not able to take this portion of the lands to date. In order to do so, unlike under the Conservation Authorities Act, a conservation authority could take this portion of the lands through a partial taking without having to go through a public process. However, Kawartha Land Trust doesn't have that same luxury. So they do actually need to go through the formal consent process in order to take a portion of the land. What will happen as a condition of the consent for this to be perfected is that these lands will actually merge on title with the lands to the east of the unimproved road allowance, as the city would not be in a position to sell those lands at this time. Another condition of that consent will be that Kawartha Land Trust will enter into a licensing agreement, as there are a few trails that cross over our unimproved road allowance. And again, that's more just from a liability perspective, that will be done. And it's at very minimal annual cost to them. If this rezoning is approved, basically it will change the zoning on this part of the property from Oak Ridge Marine Corps area, countryside area, which is one of the lesser restrictive zone categories in the Oak Ridge Marine Plan. This will become a countryside area exception number 2, I believe it is, and this will be countryside area exception number 3. For exception 2, it will allow the existing dwelling and the current development, which is one of the larger wind turbines here under the renewable energy approval. And there is some agricultural and forestry use on this portion of the property that can again continue in perpetuity. That's already permitted under their conservation easement. So there would be no changes in terms of land use there. And for this portion of the lands, it will be rezoned to really only allow the natural uses. So it will be kind of bringing it more into keeping with the intent of the Oak Ridges Moraine Plan to protect lands. So this consent will actually help protect this portion of the lands in perpetuity through the rezoning, which facilitates the consent and limits the uses on it. We'll just allow any accessory structures to the principal use being the natural heritage appreciation. So they do have like a smaller shed in that for some of the tools and that they need to keep on the property. Those sorts of things will again continue to be permitted uses, and it will go through that. So just riding the next, you can see here, these are the portion of the lands that will go to the benefiting lands, being this and this. And these lands, of course, I went for a tour actually on this property here to see it all. And they are currently working on doing some savanna restoration in a portion of the property here. So again, natural heritage appreciation, an ongoing use there from a natural heritage perspective in trying to restore the ecological integrity of the Oak Ridges Moraine. So let's back it up there. And through you, Mr. Chair, my recommendation remains that, again, this bylaw be forwarded on to council for approval. I had received actually one comment today in support of this application from the public, noting that they are pleased that it's not facilitating new development on the property. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Committee, any questions of Ian at this time? Okay, seeing none. Does the applicant, owner, or agent wish to speak to the application?
Hello, my name is Beverly Saunders. I work for EcoView Consultant Services. I am the agent for the applicant. The landowner is applying for this severance in order to donate the lands to Kawartha Land Trust. They have an existing conservation easement on the property, which already restricts uses on the lands that are being severed, and already speaks to what can occur on their property, and that's formed under a separate piece of legislation. So that already exists and it's already in place. And so this application is primarily to entrench what already is the case on these lands, and then to allow the severed portion to now be under the ownership of Kawartha Land Trust. So I just wanted to provide that context so that everyone understands why this application is being put in place. With that, the only use that is proposed on the severed portion, so the uses on the retained are intended to remain the same as what currently is permitted, including the those that are permitted under the conservation easement in terms of agriculture. And then for the severed, the intent is to essentially allow what's also permitted currently under the conservation easement. including natural heritage protection, valley land protections, and in general protections and trails associated with the severed portion. The only thing that is proposed on that property is a small shed, which would be smaller than 10 square meters. And the intent is to essentially store the equipment that's needed for the maintenance of that property. So just wanted to provide the overall context, and then I am here for any questions that the planning committee may have. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Saunders. Committee, any questions of Ms. Saunders at this time? Seeing and hearing none. Okay. Is there anyone from the public wishing to speak to this application? Anyone from the public wishing to speak to the application? Going to ask a third and final time. Anyone from the public wishing to speak to the application? Okay. Seeing and hearing none. The public meeting on this matter is concluded, and committee members, after considering all the comments provided today, what is your recommendation to council? Deputy Mayor Richardson?
Through you, I move as printed. Thank you.
Okay, motion from Deputy Mayor Richardson that report plan 2022-072 to amend the Oak Ridges Moraine Zoning Bylaw 2005-133 at 851 Bailey Duff Road, Manvers, be received. That provided there are no substantive public concerns raised at the public meeting, the zoning bylaw amendment substantially in the form attached as Appendix D to report plan 2022-072 be referred to council for approval and adoption, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute any documents required by the approval of this application. Seconded by Councillor Warren. Any discussion? Calling the question. All in favor? And that carries. Thank you. That brings us to item 3.3 on today's agenda, Plan 2022-073, an application to amend the Township of Fenland zoning bylaw 12-95 at 327 Snug Harbor Road, Fenland. And once again, Ian, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. So you can see the lands here, a fairly large parcel of land. There are actually two parcels of land. There's a smaller lot here on Snug Harbor Road. This one is identified as 327 Snug Harbor Road, and according to the city's mapping, this one is as well. We have the pasture road. I would call it an unimproved road allowance. It looks like basically an ATV trail if you're here at Snug Harbor Road at this point here, where it comes through the property. So moving on, here's the air photo, just showing the area. Vacant lands, I believe there is a communications tower of some sort in and around this part of the property here, over closer to Pasture Road. There's an existing marina here. There is an existing fourplex dwelling on 327, the property here identified as 327, the smaller one, and the proposal is to change that into the commercial property or commercial component of the property. The existing zoning is a tourist commercial zoning, which does actually recognize residential uses. It's currently 18 units in the zoning bylaw. They are proposing to reconfigure. So there was a plan of condominium previously on this property, or a plan of subdivision, I can't recall, that had expired. They are now looking at a plan of condominium, vacant land condominium for 27 lots. So 23 of the lots will be on the south side of Snug Harbor Road. I will also just note Snug Harbor Road is currently owned. It's in ownership of this land development. So through this process, through these applications, there will be a 20-meter wide right-of-way conveyed to the city for this road. So the city will be taking the road through there, so it will go into public ownership. They will be proposing a private condominium road off the south side here that will access all of the proposed lots. They have completed the necessary studies in that to confirm that adequate water and on-site sewage systems can be supplied for each individual lot. They are proposing the boat storage and a storage building here at the southwest, I guess, corner of the property, if you take into account that the north runs here kind of on an angle to the page. All of this development is tied to the principal marina use here. And so these are all, appearing to be kind of what we would call waterfront backlots. They are all tied to the primary shoreline piece of the property. So they're functioning more like a first tier waterfront development. The existing official plan designation treats the entire property as being in the waterfront designation, which does support the development. And so again, all the technical studies have been supplied. Currently, the review is being completed. We do have a few comments back since writing the report. We have also received comments from Kawartha Conservation, which have been just this morning. I managed to collect all the comments and provide those to the applicant. I don't know if the applicant will be available to speak at this meeting or not, but certainly at this point in time, I have also spoken with the owner, and they are aware that the recommendation at this point is to refer it back to staff. This is a public meeting. This is a chance to collect all the public's concerns and comments, take those into consideration, and it would also allow the owner and applicant any opportunity, if there's any changes that need to be made, to correspond with any concerns or to try to address those. And then we would bring back a recommendation at a later time once we have all the full technical comments back. I will note we have not yet received any comments from Trent Severn Waterway in terms of the shoreline development. You can see that there will be some new docks in that proposed. So there certainly will be some Trent Severn Waterway approvals required. Ministry of Environment approvals potentially for some of the stormwater pieces. They're looking at trying to implement low impact development techniques where possible to deal with stormwater. So just making note of that. Again, this is the configuration. One of the quick things to note is that they're proposing an R1 exception zone. We believe, though, when it comes back, there are 4 lots that are fronting on Snug Harbor Road, which would be a public road. Certainly those could be the R1 zone. The remainder of the lots actually will be on a private condo road. So we would instead, as an alternative, propose that they be a limited service residential, which would recognize that they're not fronting on a public road, but doesn't really make any difference in terms of how the zoning bylaw is structured, other than just dealing with the fact that they're not fronting on a public road. So it would still be, again, they're still looking at the same provisions, and this information is just being made available now. So certainly we would not anticipate that another public meeting would be required later on. This would come back to a returning meeting, and anybody who's expressed an interest to date, I think we do have several individuals who've expressed interest, and I have received a number of emails and voicemails, which I have all of them logged. So all of those individuals are listed now as interested parties and will be kept apprised of any changes to the proposal and any future recommendations on this. So lastly here, I'll just show you the concept lot plan. So of course there are some corner lots or triangle shaped lots on the corners, and then the more rectangle shaped lots showing the potential for a residence. And of course they will each have private individual well, and you'll see these blocks here with a P and an S. So these would be kind of your primary septic system area, as well as a secondary septic system area. So they always have a reserve area that allows that if the septic system were to fail, there's another location for it to go. So that's being reviewed in terms of the building division for on-site sewage. So at that, I will end my presentation and I will leave it open for questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Committee, any questions of Ian at this time? Councillor Warren?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, could you tell me what some of the low impact development initiatives might be?
So through you, Mr. Chair, there can be opportunities for putting in like some depressions in that where infiltration could occur. Most of the areas will be, as you saw on the plan. I'll just share it again here quickly so you can have a look. but these are a natural landscaped area. So they're anticipating really keeping, a lawn area around the house and kind of the functional area of the property, but then having some natural area on each property that allows for some infiltration. The whole idea is that, yes, they have provided, they have provided, there's a stormwater feature over here as well on the north side that would eventually outlet into Sturgeon Lake. However, it should be that all of the water is considered clean and treated by the time it reaches that. So I would also just really defer to engineering and corporate assets in terms of the review of the specific low impact development, the actual technical review of that, as well as Kawartha Conservation has reviewed this application and has provided comments. I've not actually had an opportunity to read their comments yet, had just received them since writing the report, and I've made sure that the proponent has a copy of those, but I have not had a chance to actually review those.
Member Barkwell.
Through you, Mr. Chair. A few of the comments have been about the boat storage and whether it's going to be covered or whether it be open, how many boats would be stored, is that a major business? And the location, whether that's a good location for it or whether it should be shuffled back to the back a little bit. It's a bit of an eyesore.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Member Barkwell. I will have to defer to the applicant in terms of number of boats and all that to be stored there. The zoning provisions, though, will capture certain setbacks as far as any of that thing. Some of the items that can be dealt with, though, would be looking at the commercial development would be subject to site plan control, potentially. I guess we also have to consider what changes are coming through Bill 23 and whether that may impact on site plan for that development or not. But we can look at also having things done like fencing or something like that in terms of the compound itself to make sure that it's not visible to the public. We also know that there are 27 units proposed, and it would be the storage area at the southwest corner there is proposed specific to those 27 individual lots. So the landowners for those. So I guess it would depend how many boats, some of them have. But I mean, usually you would kind of expect one boat per family perhaps being stored there. So, but I'd defer to the applicant if they have more detailed information.
Thank you, Ian, and I'll wait to hear what they say. Thank you.
Any further questions of Ian at this time? Okay, seeing and hearing none, does the applicant, owner, or their agent wish to speak to the application?
There we go. With regards to the boat storage, the intent is specifically to have that parcel of land specifically for the homeowners who will be deemed to dock as well at the marina. So the intent is not to have a retail storage operation there. The intent of the Harborview, and that's how we're renaming it, is to have a community of homes coupled with a community of waterfront mooring clients. It's going to be a closed environment. We do not want a retail environment. So we will not be receiving any type of off-road type storage clientele. It's specifically for the individuals of the Harborview development. So, and again, the intent is not to have multiple level storage like you'd see in Florida or something like that. This is ground storage. It's going to be in keeping with the surrounding area, meaning if you look at the landscape diagram, we're proposing berms 3 to 5 feet plus vegetation. So again, it's not to, we want to hide it from the surrounding area and complement what's there, not distract from it. So if that answers your question with regards to the boat storage. The marina itself on the north parcel, it will continue to operate as a marina specifically for the clients of the marina. Again, the retail operation is non-existent. So the intent is to move specifically to, service the clients of that marina on that site specifically. and then the community itself will have its own storage facility. Okay?
If I might, or do you want to wait till he's finished? Yeah, just because right now you do a lot of boat storage for your marine clients.
Correct.
And that's where your 4 waterfront lots are going to be.
Correct.
So
the prior owner, if I can, they subleased a portion of the commercial marina to a third party mechanic service, who operates out of there today. It's zoned for it. It's still C3. However, going forward, the intent is obviously those are going to be residential lots, and we're going to bring back what services we offer as a marina. It's not a traditional marina in that we don't offer gas, we don't offer lubricants, and going forward, we won't be offering mechanical services. We are going to strictly be a mooring facility and then a waterfront community in the back.
okay, if you're renting out slips, you're going to need parking for all of those cars that are coming in and to store their. So I just think that's going to be a bit of a clutter over there. Just a concern.
Yeah. No. Today we have 79 slips at the moorings, with ample parking for over 100. That's not changing. The new development will have 30 new slips under 15 dedicated docks, when people are not going to be driving to their slips because they're going to be walking to their slips. So there's no need for parking per se at a slip that I can walk to or ride my bike to, and that is the intent. So we have 2 separate communities, one being the existing harborfront community, which is the moorings, mooring your boat, and the other one being the actual development side. But they will both be within the same property, using the same ancillary services, the same amenities. But again, it's going to be a closed community. We're not going to be doing retail out of there.
Thank you. Could we just get your name for the record, please?
Sorry, Jay Allen. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Is there any further questions from committee for Mr. Allen at this time? Okay, seeing and hearing none. Sorry, go ahead.
Can I speak? That was I responded to the question, but I just wanted to speak in general to the application.
Yep, go ahead.
I think again, I've talked to Ian about this. I think it's important for everyone to understand that this is an existing zoning. It was approved back in 2013 for 18 homes. There was a development application in place that was extended at 2016 through 2019. So I'm not asking for a net new, our zoning is basically, we're trying to apply the existing site-specific characteristics, which is 2,700 square meters per lot, to the entire parcel. Therefore, that's why the numbers are 23. So we're not asking to do anything different than what's already been approved. So I think it's really a small zoning change from that perspective. If you look at what was approved in the past, the 13 studies have all been accepted, including KRCA. So what we've done over the last 18 months is updated all the studies to current standards. And again, from a technical and engineering standpoint, they all passed that test. So what we're asking for is, again, a technical amendment to the zoning, not a net new development in the middle of nowhere. This has been vetted for years, and it's been supported for years. In our discussions with engineering, I think we're on the same page that we understand where the goal line is, and we're going to work with them. And they acknowledge that, and we acknowledge that. The information we got back this morning from KRCA, it talks about water balancing, talks about phosphorus loads. Again, we'll address those through the development process. This is a rezoning, to allow for this to happen. So I just want to make sure everyone understands that this isn't a brand new thing that we've just created, where we're working on some fundamentals that have been around for 10 years. So again, we're looking to start the process now so that we can work towards these ends with engineering, KRCA, and all the other stakeholders.
Okay, thanks very much, Mr. Allen. Committee, any questions to Mr. Allen at this time? Okay, seeing and hearing none, is there anyone from the public wishing to speak to this application? Yep, go forward, come forward.
Yes, my name is Doug Shaw. Hi. And I'd like to concern the environment on this proposal. I'd like to find out where the stormwater and the wastewater is going to go from the roads, and where the settling basins and ponds are for that before it goes into Sturgeon Lake. Sturgeon Lake is very badly polluted at this point. We don't need any more pollution levels being put into the lakes and rivers in this area. I'm very concerned about any development, and I see the future, and the future doesn't look good on an environmental. I also see problems with erosion in the future. A lot of these things go by the wayside, and then we find out that erosion and the studies were not properly taken into consideration at the development stage. So these things are something that should be looked at in the future also with this development. There's been some serious erosion problems in the past in places like Victoria Place. And my mother and father lived in Victoria Place and dealt with those issues. That was from a developer that put something in and it didn't work. I'd like to see that, you know, things are addressed properly in the future with this, with the engineering. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Shaw. Is there anyone else from the public wishing to speak to the application? Okay, I think we've got a couple online. Stella?
Hi, yes, Mr. Chairman, hello. Start my video. Okay, let me put my video first. Sorry. Okay. Hi. Hello, Mr. Chairman. This is Stella Yun, and thank you for letting me to speak today. I'm not opposed to rezone this vacant land for the development, but I strongly against the marina boat storage to be built in that location, which is just quite close to my property. And it should be built away from the home of the residents. And I have put my concern in writing already, and there are several reasons to support my objection. Firstly, a non-residential building built right beside my property, and they look ugly, not matched with the surroundings. And third one, the boat storage should be built close to the lakefront. Please refer to my material, which I have submitted earlier. And the fourth is incur unnecessary traffic in our area, especially the forklift pickup trucks with the boat trailer will be busy on the Snug Harbor Road. So I will have it all in your capable hands with our feedback, and hopefully whatever decision you make is the best interest of the residents. And I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Yoon, and I can confirm that the committee does have your written correspondence that have been submitted.
Oh, really? I submitted when I
No.
made the reservation.
Yes, the committee does. I'm confirming that the committee does have your written correspondence.
Okay.
Okay? Thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think, is there a Blair Gagnon online?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you for recognizing me. I'm primarily here to watch and listen. I'm subject to receiving further reports and studies that staff is expecting to have based upon the recommendation of the committee. We'll reserve comment until such time this process moves forward to council. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public wishing to speak to the application this afternoon? Okay, calling a final time. Anyone else from the public wishing to speak to the application? All right. Seeing and hearing none, does the applicant wish to respond to any of the comments?
Yes, if I can. Also like to introduce Kent Randall from EcoView, if I can. Kent, come on up. With respect to again, going back to the storage unit, it is not a retail operation whereby pickup trucks are going to be, again, if you've driven down Snug Harbor Road in the last 5 years, it is littered with cars and trucks and boat trailers and whatnot. That is not the intent. And specifically, once we convey the Snug Harbor Road to the city then retains ownership of that road and that right-of-way. And no longer will it permit, those things to occur regardless. Secondly, we've installed a gate. I don't know if you're by the area, in order to stop people from just using this area, we've installed a gate to get into our marina, and subsequently we'll be installing a gate to get into the development. So again, going back to it being a closed community, it truly is going to be, from a traffic standpoint, not accessible unless you're supposed to be there, which will circumvent all these issues with respect to who's parking on the roads. And if you can't get access to our boat launch, you're going to move on to a public launch, hopefully. That's the intent. And then with respect to some of the planning aspects.
Sure. Thanks, Jay, and hello, everyone. So I just briefly, just expanding on what Jay had said about the zoning. So it is important to keep in mind that there is existing zoning that permits residential development, and mostly there's some slight changes that we're making to the existing zoning. However, as Jay had said, the performance standards, those lot regulations are all the same, 2,700 square meters for each lot, same lot frontage, same setbacks, etc. All of those studies that had been submitted before are being updated, including stormwater management. There was a comment about, stormwater quality and quantity all being controlled on the site, right? There's no surface water, groundwater has been studied in terms of hydrogeology. And I should also point out that we did have an open house last week at the Days Inn, and we had about 20 people there. Neighbors, it was very positive. We were able to answer a lot of questions. People came out of the meeting, it seemed positive. So I just want to point that out as well. So and just that we have looked at these things, and we have considered these aspects, these technical aspects of the development. Just based on the comments that we have received and based on what has been approved before, we do feel that this can move to the next stage in terms of draft plan approval, where we can deal with any other outstanding technical comments through draft plan conditions of condominium. So if it is possible, we would like to have this move forward to council for approval if we could. We do understand and respect the recommendation from staff, but we do feel that we're in a position that we could move this forward.
Okay, thank you very much for those comments. At this point, the public meeting on this matter is concluded, and committee, after considering all the comments provided, what would you like your recommendation to council to be? Member O'Reilly?
Could I ask a question of staff before I make a recommendation?
Absolutely.
The recommendation is to refer it back to staff. If this was to be referred back to staff, could we have any idea how soon it would come forward with the appropriate studies? Because we don't want to delay it any longer. I don't think we've said it's up to 18 months, the wishes of this committee, what they want to do. But maybe to Ian or somebody, if it was to be referred back, what would how short a time frame would it be before it could come back to this committee?
Through the chair to Member O'Reilly, in this instance, it would be something where we would anticipate we should be able to get the technical review and everything completed. Any further discussions in that with the applicant if necessary, and probably preparing bylaws then that would be coming forward to most likely the February Planning Advisory Committee. I think that would be the earliest date for it to return. It will take, of course, a little bit of staff time in that to prepare everything, put together a report for it to return, and analyze all the information collected today as well. Thank you.
And just a further question. We do know we had the concerns of a number of the local residents. Would you agree, not agree that most of these could be dealt with when we get to draft plan approval and site plan agreement?
Through through the chair to Member O'Reilly, I believe that a lot of those housekeeping matters could be dealt with, through the detailed design and that, and as conditions. So we could look at addressing any of those concerns, perhaps not as far as moving the location of where the storage is proposed to go, but how it's handled, how it's how it's designed and how it will function such that it's not creating an impact for the existing lots, the existing neighboring lots.
Go ahead.
Are you good, Member O'Reilly?
Yeah, seeing that I think we're really close to moving this forward today, but if we can get it back in February, I give you the recommendation that we have here today, that they amend the township zoning via Fenelon Falls, Snug Harbor, and application be received, and that we refer it back to staff for further comments, because it sounds like through our staff that there are some still minor comments to come in, and hopefully we can get this back by February.
Okay. Is there a seconder for that motion? Member Barkwell? Okay. Discussion, Mayor Elmsley?
I had another question for Ian, if I could. Did you say in your presentation that you were still waiting for comments back from agencies like MECP?
Through the chair to Mayor Elmsley, I don't believe that MECP will be providing any commentary on this rezoning application. They were not circulated. There may be components of it that might require MECP approvals. Those would be done separately from the rezoning process. Trent Severn Waterway has not commented on it. However, again, they would just be involved in terms of any of the in-water or shoreline works that are necessary. There are permitting processes as well for that, so they may not end up providing comments to the city in that regard.
Thank you.
Member Willock?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Ian, it sounds like it's KRCA is the last one you need to review.
Through the chair to Member Willock, KRCA comments have been received. I know I provided those to the applicant. I have not yet had a chance to look at them. My understanding, though, is from what Mr. Allen has said, is that most of those comments are really just technical comments that deal with some of the actual detailed design. Again, the detailed design can be done at, the next stage after the zoning.
Okay. Any further discussion? Calling the question. All in favor? And that carries. Thank you. That now brings us to item 3.4, Plan 2022-074, an application to amend the Town of Lindsay zoning bylaw 2000-75 at 21 David Drive. Mark Lahaye, go ahead.
Good afternoon, members of Planning Advisory Committee. Notice for this application for the zoning bylaw amendment was given to each assessed landowner within 120 meters and all applicable agencies and departments, and a sign was posted on the property in accordance with the Planning Act. Now I'm going to try and share my screen here. See that? Okay. The property is located west of Angeline Street North between Colburn Street West and Thunder Bridge Road within a neighborhood consisting of 1- and 2-story single detached residential dwellings. The application proposes to rezone the westerly half of the property from the residential 1 zone to a future residential zone in anticipation of future residential development and to facilitate the severance of the lands. The future residential zone category is proposed to be implemented on the westerly side of the property in this particular area here. And that's one of the proposed new lots to be severed. And it's intended to protect the lands from incompatible development and uses and ensure that the lot will not be developed until such time that future development applications are provided to the city. This future residential zone category only permits at present agricultural use, public utilities, and existing legal uses subject to specific zone provisions. A further zoning amendment will be required at a minimum to permit site-specific residential uses and zone provisions to accommodate a particular lot configuration when known, which is anticipated to be part of a process for a future plan of subdivision. Various documents and plans were submitted by the applicant in support of the proposed amendment, which have been circulated to the applicable agencies and city departments for review and comment. Staff have reviewed the planning justification report that was prepared and filed in support of the application and generally accepts the planning rationale provided in the context of relevant provincial and city of Kawartha Lakes policies and plans. Since the writing of this report, public comments were received from Cindy Baldry, a resident of Hopkins Road, inquiring about the conceptual plan that was attached to the notice that was received. And she also requested more information with respect to who prepared the plans and what actually will be built. The proposed future residential zone would remove the existing R1 zone from the westerly half of the property. An additional zoning bylaw amendment application accompanied with the appropriate studies to be determined through further pre-consultation will be required to permit residential uses and establish site-specific development standards. This will establish the appropriate type, scale, and form of future residential development that would be considered appropriate for the lands. The rezoning of the property in anticipation of future residential development is beneficial as it aligns with provincial and municipal policies and objectives for the intensification of a site within an existing urban settlement area and facilitates severance of the subject lands. In consideration of the comments and analysis that's contained in the report, and including comments received from the public at the time of writing a report completion, provided there are no other substantive public concerns that are raised at the public meeting, staff respectfully recommends that the proposed zoning bylaw amendment be referred to council for approval. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Committee, any questions of Mark at this time? Okay, seeing none, does the owner, applicant, or agent on behalf of the owner wish to speak to the application?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Kent Randall again, Principal EcoView Consulting. We're the agents and planners for Mr. Kennedy, who's also with me today. First and foremost, we concur, of course, with the recommendation, and happy to see it coming forward to you for your consideration today. Just to emphasize, and Mark had mentioned it a couple times, is that plan that you see there with the cul-de-sac, that is simply just conceptual. That's it. We're not planning a number, the townhomes that are shown there or that plan of subdivision there. That's not what's before you. Simply just to show and demonstrate and illustrate to staff what is possible on that site in order to facilitate the severances towards the east. Okay, so that's not before you. That's not what we're proposing. The future development of those lands will come at some point in the future. Will require zoning bylaw amendment. Will require draft plan of subdivision or condominium or whatever else is required to facilitate future development. So I just want to emphasize that because a lot of those public comments that we've seen come in were concerns with what is happening with that land, and we don't know at this point. But that was simply just to illustrate that. Unfortunately, it goes out on a notice and everybody's imaginations run wild, right? So, as Mark had pointed out, that future residential or FD zone will remain on that, or will apply to the balance of those lands. And this is simply just facilitating the severances that we're proposing on the eastern side of the lot. And I'm happy to answer any questions that the committee may have. Thanks.
Thanks, Mr. Randall. Committee, any questions for Mr. Randall at this time? Okay, seeing and hearing none. Is there anyone from the public wishing to speak to this application? Anyone from the public wishing to speak to this application? Calling a third and final time. Anyone from the public wishing to speak to the application? All right. Seeing and hearing none, the public meeting on this matter is concluded, and committee, after considering the comments made today, what recommendation would you like to make to council?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'd recommend it be passed as printed.
Okay, so we have a motion from Member Willick that report plan 2022-074, part of Lot 23, Concession 4, Geographic Township of Ops, former town of Lindsay, identified as 21 David Drive, Shoal Inc. D06-2022-030 be received, that the proposed zoning bylaw amendment substantially in the form attached as Appendix D to Report Plan 2022-074 be adopted by council, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute any documents required by the approval of this application. Is there a seconder? Member O'Reilly, any discussion? Calling the question, all in favor? And that carries. Thank you. That brings us to item 3.5 on today's agenda, Plan 2022-075, an application to amend the Village of Omemee zoning bylaw 1993-15 at 43 and 46 Dean Street North, Omemee. Richard Hawley.
Good afternoon, committee and members of the public. This is a rezoning application submitted by Austin and Alana Westlake at 43 and 46 Dean Street North in Omemee. Purpose of the application is to recognize an existing towing operation and related outdoor storage. Additional ancillary uses would include minor vehicle inspection and repairs. So if a vehicle comes in that has that is leaking fluids, so on and so forth, it would be taken into the garage. Everything would be secured. All the fluids would be drained appropriately and then stored. The application or this operation is also being considered as a secondary use to the existing residence that's on the property. The applicant is seeking the rezoning in order to be able to operate and apply for the roadside towing of vehicles through the Ontario Provincial Police. He purchased the property a number of years ago. It was the old Midland Railway property. Has cleaned the entire property up. Has sided all of the buildings on the property, and the existing compound has also been sided with a green metal siding. So everything is enclosed. It's a very discreet operation. So the entire outdoor storage compound is enclosed, and you can't see anything on the property if you go there to take a look. There is an entrance that goes into to the main towing operation. Goes in right off of the end of Dean Street. That goes into the towing building, and then there's a separate entrance that comes in, and I'm sorry I don't have my pointer, but it comes in just before Dean Street hits the property. It comes in before that, and then it goes to it goes around to the back and into the towing compound, and it also serves the existing residential dwelling that's on the property as well. The applicant has provided a number of background reports, including a planning rationale and related works. There was also a septic brief provided because this operation will share a septic jointly with the existing dwelling. The septic for the existing dwelling was oversized to accommodate this operation once it was going to come through the rezoning process. From a provincial policy perspective, the application conforms with the growth plan and the provincial policy statement, directs these types of uses to urban areas. It provides employment, and it also deals with the environmental aspects of the business as well by ensuring that minimal environmental impact happens while the vehicles are stored in the compound. The application also conforms with the city's official plan. The application and the development fits into the area, fits into the character. doesn't have any negative impacts on any of the surrounding properties. The applicant is looking to change the residential and the community facility zoning to an R1 exception zoning to recognize the towing operation in conjunction with the house. So the two uses can't separate. They always have to be together from that perspective. If in the future they did want to separate the house from the towing operation, they would have to come back before Planning Advisory Committee to get a rezoning application again. So the idea is that the two function together. The application was circulated to everyone within 120 meters. We had no concerns raised, no inquiries on this proposal. The application was also circulated to all applicable agencies. Nobody had any concerns with the proposal. From a planning perspective, we feel that the application is acceptable within the area. The use is compatible with the surrounding uses. It's a very large property, and the use doesn't impact, it has no impacts, and it doesn't impact any of the surrounding uses. We will be, if the zoning is approved, we will be taking it through a site plan approval process just to ensure that the use stays within the confines of the zoning bylaw. So from that perspective, would respectfully recommend that the zoning application be approved and referred to council. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Hawley. Committee, any questions of Director Hawley at this time? Okay, so Member O'Reilly.
I just what warranted to have the top dog handle this application?
Staffing shortages.
All right, seeing no questions, does the owner or their agent or the applicant wish to speak to the application?
Good afternoon. My name is Ken Westlake, and I was just more or less on just to answer any questions that may transpire.
Okay, thank you very much. Committee, any questions of Mr. Westlake at this time? All right. Is there anyone from the public wishing to speak to the application? Go ahead, Mr. Shaw. Can you just turn your mic on, please?
There we go, found it, sorry. One thing I would like to maybe bring forward is that these places sometimes come up with wrecking yards. Would there be a number of days that a vehicle can sit there for before it's dealt with? These places sometimes turn into scrap yards. And I'm kind of concerned about the public in the area and, you know, how this would affect the public in the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Mr. Westlake, would you like to respond to any of that?
Sure, I will. As Richard Hawley can attest to, this place was a disaster when we purchased it. And since then, we have cleaned it up. It used to very well be a scrapyard, and it used to very well be a mess, but we cleaned it up. We live here on the property. We respect our property. We respect our neighbors, and no, it will never be a scrapyard. The vehicles are handled as fast as they can through the insurance company and removed from the property as fast as possible.
Thanks for that, Mr. Westlake. Director Hawley, you wanted to respond?
Yes, certainly. Thank you. A wrecking yard is not a permitted use on the property. So from that perspective, if that did happen, bylaw, and we got a complaint on that, then bylaw enforcement would be brought in to investigate and lay charges on that. Thank you.
Okay, at this point, the public meeting on this matter is concluded. Committee, after considering all of the comments made today, what is your recommendation to council? Councillor Warren?
I'll move the recommendation.
Okay, so we have that report plan 2022-075 rezoning application, Austin and Atlanta Westlake be received, that provided there are no substantive public concerns raised at the public meeting, that a bylaw respecting the rezoning application D06-2022-025 Austin and Atlanta Westlake substantially in the form attached as Appendix C to Report Plan 2022-075 be approved by Council, and that the Mayor and Clerk be authorized to execute any documents and agreements required by the approval of this agreement. Is there a seconder for that motion? Mayor Elmsley. Any discussion? Calling the question. All in favor? And that carries. Thank you. So at this point, the public meeting held under the Planning Act is now adjourned. All recommendations from today's meeting will be forwarded to the December 13th council meeting. And that brings us to item 4 on our agenda, deputations, which I believe there are none. Correct, Joel? And item 5, correspondence, which I believe we've received none. That brings us to 6, regular and returned reports. Item 6.1, engineering 2022-001, 2023 subdivision agreement template updates. Christina Sisson.
Good afternoon. As an update, annually, we look at the subdivision agreement template to... Am I not on? Sorry. We're looking at the updates for the 2023 subdivision agreement template. As a result of the recent craft development here in Lindsay, the Lindsay 2017 developments, Sugarwood, the craft phase 1 subdivision agreement template or subdivision agreement was reviewed extensively internally and externally for legal improvements. As a result of that, we saw the prime opportunity to then include some additional revisions this year to go forward with 2023. You'll note in the report there are some that are listed here. I won't go through every single one of them, but I am open for questions. Primarily, the legal recitals were a rearranging of where council's approval came into those particular commentaries. We looked for improvements to try to support our development community in terms of keeping people moving. We also want to always encourage the development to proceed in a timely fashion. Hence, we have a limitation on the time perspective between the base asphalt and the top course asphalt. We're looking at a maximum of 3 years there. This is as a result of some previous iterations many years ago would have allowed people to continue to just allow the subdivision to languish at base asphalt until such time as all the houses were built. The level of development that's occurring right now and the pace at which development is proceeding, we see that as not being the primary holdback to why development would continue. But we really want to get that top course asphalt on, entertain the maintenance period, the warranty period, and keep the projects moving and get them into our maintenance perspective and assumed. We, in development engineering, tend to take a look at all of these activities, and we implement the subdivision agreement primarily, so that's why we have some of these recommendations as well. However, we do consult with all of the parties listed here. Planning has an opportunity to introduce language in terms of looking at the templates as well. As I say, this was an extensively legal process at this time. You'll note that the entire risk management section in terms of insurance and liability, et cetera, was completely revamped and put as a new separate individual section in the agreement as well. That came as a result of the review from legal services and risk management as well. Public Works had some specific commentary, some clarification, et cetera, that they wanted, primarily around the maintenance and the standards and guidelines by which we accept municipal infrastructure. So with that, I do have some other, obviously there have been some other changes here, but also including the DAP fee. Their development application approval processing fee is basically an engineering fee. It's used to have the municipality review the plans of subdivision, et cetera, based on the engineering design. And it also incorporates the fee for all subsequent reviews. So that covers inspections and our warranty review, et cetera. So that had been already increased to 4.5% for the 2023 timeframe. At the PAC meeting, it was 2022-065 is the report resolution that we came through with that. So we also needed to make sure that that 4.5% was included in the cost estimate. So that was the other update here. Do you have any questions for me, or would you like anything else explained? I'm open.
Thanks for the update, Christina. Committee questions? Mayor Elmsley?
Thank you. Thank you for the report. One of the items on here is confirmation of tree preservation and streetscape requirements and tree planting requirements. We don't have a tree clearing or tree cutting bylaw at all. So is this contrary to that, tree preservation, or it works with it?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the city solicitor is currently working with the planning division on the tree preservation bylaw and some expectations with respect to tree planting, et cetera. So what we have tried to do is incorporate language to support what comes forward through this next year. A lot of the developments I'm seeing more recently have been more of a turnover from agricultural lands to residential, so we're not seeing that same level of tree removal. However, we have to be cognizant that where that comes into play, we typically would handle a lot of that through our pre-servicing agreements, whereby we would understand if there was any regulated area under the Conservation Authorities Act, if there was any location where there was some sensitivity near the shorelines, Jennings Creek, that type of thing. But we're trying to incorporate language. This is language that's been brought to us from the city solicitor to try and ensure that we are ready for the next stage, and perhaps Director Hawley could speak more to that timing. But that's really the intent here.
Thank you. No, that's fine.
Deputy Mayor Richardson.
Thank you, and through you. I just want to make a comment at this time. Just looking at the proposed 28 changes really does give a lot of teeth to the SOP moving forward. So it's really good to see that, we're putting some more thought in how we move forward, especially with the futures of development in our area. So I'm happy to see this report. So thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Warren?
Yeah, through you. Just bear with me. I have a couple questions, if you don't mind. Seeing I'm going to be on the active transportation task force, and I know that's going to be one of the initiatives going forward, is to have multi-use trails in new developments. So as long as there could be amended language going forward in the product that you've brought forward, that was one issue. The other one was the type of trees. Is it going to be specific because climate change, Carolinian, that sort of thing, and more low impact development standards, and what else? Those were the main issues. Also on fill, will there be any language around fill being tested coming into the municipality? It was a big issue years ago. I don't see a lot of that conversation lately, but it's a big issue, especially with all the development going forward.
So through you, Mr. Chair, I might start at the bottom and work my way up, and I apologize if I've missed something in the conversation. The municipality does have a site alteration bylaw that is used to discuss the removal, any movement of fill, et cetera, on lands that aren't actually slated for development. So that's more the private enterprises that are going on and trying to protect for those types of activities. Once you enter into or actually apply for either a site plan or a subdivision, you really do have to start into this whole process with a registered agreement in order to support any movement of fill, any earthworks, etc. We typically have to have at the very least a grading plan, but we also have to speak to where's the material coming from, what is the material, how often is it tested, is it suitable for the zoning that's in place for the land, and it all happens under a pre-servicing agreement at that stage. But there has to be a certain level of design that we are aware of, because we clearly don't want to bring in more material where it's not necessary or take away from another area. And this is a challenge sometimes in that people have a vision for a large parcel of land, and we need to make sure we have some fairly good engineering to make sure that it actually meets our criteria. So that's more or less the fill. We're under the same obligations. Now, our city solicitor also is looking at the excess soils. We're all involved in some of those workshops and mandates as well to try to be updated for the January 2023. When the new excess soils regulation becomes effective again. We had a delay during the pandemic. So as a result of that, we are looking at whether we're going to have to put any more supportive language into this agreement, but it really doesn't speak to you being able to move the material. So that's kind of the key here, is we're not giving people an as of right permission to move material around. We're saying you have to do it with all of the same provisions as our site alteration bylaw suggests, but also in terms of whatever the legislation going forward will be. And I believe that we're looking at the site alteration bylaw as well to see what needs to be updated for the excess soils. So working backwards, we talked about trees. I may have missed one in between there. So in terms of the trees and what we recommend, we have on our guidelines on our website trees that have been vetted through the Parks and Recreation Division of the City of Kawartha Lakes. They are the ones that primarily look after trees within our right-of-ways. They're aware of which species are having some struggles right now, more trees than you would like to see on that list have those struggles. So what we have tried to do is put together the list together that makes sense for trees that have been successful in our planting areas, right? Because that's what we need to do, is make sure that we can expect those plants to live a certain, or tree types to live a certain lifespan. It's changing, and with climate change, we're having to be respectful of the fact that we may be able to, at some point, plant trees that are from a more southern region right now, bring them in, and they may be more successful as we go forward. But again, it is something that we meet with annually to discuss, and it is another aspect of the relationship between that particular group and ourselves in terms of making sure that we're getting the tree experts at the table. We had a preliminary meeting towards the end of this year, and we're looking at another one in the new year. Then with respect to low impact development, one of the items in here, and I probably shouldn't have just glossed over it because it's actually quite exciting, except that I noticed CLI is a term that we're using for mapping. So we're gonna have some issues when we have all these acronyms. Previously, the municipality would have relied on the Ministry of Environment, in whatever version of environment it was, to provide approval for municipal servicing, all our infrastructure underground. More recently, we were very successful in receiving transfers of review, whereby we did the ministry review on their behalf of all the municipal infrastructure. The ministry is taking it to the next level and has introduced a consolidated linear infrastructure, CLI again, environmental compliance approval. And this municipality most recently has been successful in receiving not only the storm and stormwater management aspect of that particular approval, but also the sanitary, which is fantastic because as you're aware, we have so much of this type of infrastructure across our municipality. So what has happened as a result of that is the ministry has more or less said, you have carte blanche to expand those systems as long as you meet these objectives, these rules, etc. A lot of those are in alignment with ours, so we're in pretty good shape there. But it is going to be, and it's not another layer of approval, because it really comes down to the municipality to ensure that everything is being met. But that means that we now can approve all of that, and we don't have to send anything on to the ministry. So before, you might have been 6 months to 9 months to get an approval under the regular environmental compliance approval or certificate of approval. Then it went down to about a month when we were successful with a transfer review. Now we don't have that aspect at all. It gives a time savings to the developers, but here is where I'm coming back to your actual question, and that is, it's reliant on us using low-impact development. We're being really prescribed by the province to try to retain. We call it the 90th percentile storm. So 90% of the rain that falls, we're expecting to actually get into the ground. They don't want this running off anymore from a parking lot, from a road, sidewalk, etc. They're wanting a lot of this water to go back into the ground. I know you all are very familiar with our soils, and this is not always an easy sell in our community, but we are working with different developments, and we have been, because we recognize this was coming forward. We recognize that that needs to happen. The reality is we need it to happen where it makes sense. So in our community, we more likely wouldn't just have an infiltration trench per se, we would likely have also an overflow pipe or a secondary pipe, so that if there is any reason why we have more, picture a rainstorm after a snow melt, right? You can imagine more water than maybe could actually successfully get infiltrated during frozen ground conditions. We then have an overflow condition for that. So based on that, we're trying to work really closely with our development community to encourage more of the low impact development, and not just in words, right? We're trying to take access of some of the models that are available, some of the costing that's available. We're getting a lot more involved in trying to, that's part of our role. We have to project manage to get the community that we want, right? I feel like I've left out a question. Multi-use trails. So multi-use trails have been a discussion factor for many years. We had one installed with Morningside Acres back in 2009 or 10, somewhere in that era. They're recognized as being very important to provide not only supplementary locations for people to walk, but also to provide, access for bicycles, for scooters, that type of thing. They're typically only an asphalt base and not maintained in the winter. And that so far is where we've been headed with it. But we also recognize that while we are trying to keep track of some of the other moving parcels and pieces that are happening with respect to development, improvements and efficiencies, the Active Transportation Master Plan currently under the Development Services Planning arm and the Active Trails Plan, that's master plan that's under Parks and Rec. We've been working with both parties to try to make sure that if there's an opportunity to bring all of that together, we'd really rather have one road guideline that incorporates both. So to date, we've included a multi-use trail in one of our cross sections. We actually now have it, I believe, on 2, because we've recognized we may need them in more locations than not. They're not in lieu of a sidewalk, they are usually in addition to. There's still an expectation you would have a sidewalk on the other side of the road because, and they've been typically only on our collector arterial, our wider road base of 26 meters, to get it to fit and to make sure everything else aligns, but we have been looking at whether we can accommodate them in the 20-meter local road allowance as well. Again, we're trying to do this to make sure, A, all the other infrastructure fits and has access without us doing too much damage. We don't, every time we do a capital project, we don't want to replace absolutely everything if we don't have to. But we also have to make sure that they connect to something, right? You have to have the sidewalk because you still have to be able to move pedestrians any time of the year. We may switch out. There may be enough impetus to make the multi-use trail more accessible year-round. Not sure where a lot of this is going. My direction from the CAO has been keep the proposals moving forward, and then we're going to see what that looks like in terms of how we implement them. One of the primary concerns is always operation and maintenance of any additional infrastructure, especially if it's different than what we currently have. But we've been working through that. Did I missed one?
No, that's great. I'm just thinking, before all the development happens, that in the planning process, that you do make the paved part of the road wider to accommodate that, before, all the services are put into the development.
And and those are our road cross sections that we have.
Yeah, so I think you hit all the areas that I was interested in, but if not, I'll give you a call. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions of Christina at this time? Okay, seeing none. Deputy Mayor Richardson?
I will move as printed.
Okay, so we have a motion That report ENG 2022-001 subdivision agreement template updates, engineering and corporate assets be received. That the city's subdivision agreement and cost estimate schedule templates be updated and amended as outlined in Appendix A and B, respectively, to report ENG 2022-001, and that the city staff be directed to continue to monitor annually for any improvements to the language in the template of the subdivision agreement to ensure there are opportunities to refine the timelines and clarify language with the development process. Is there a seconder for that motion? Member Barkwell, any discussion? Calling the question, all in favor? And that carries. Thank you. Item 6.2, ENG 2022-038, Assumption of Four Winds Subdivision Phase 3 Ops.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Four Winds Phase 3 is somewhat of a legacy project in the rural area. It started with a previous phase. They did some works ahead of time, and then we entered into a subdivision agreement in 2013. So the lots were built quite quickly, and that's a good news story in the rural area, as our rural subdivisions typically take between 10 and 20 years to build out. But it did take a little bit of effort on, the city's side through the subdivision agreement to encourage getting to the next level. And that is primarily making sure the ditches were draining properly, the ponds were cleaned out. We had a previous pond in the previous phase that was also being used for this phase. So to be prudent, we ensured that both ponds weren't cleaned out until after all of the development had taken place. We then needed the top course of asphalt to also be placed. And a walkway. There were some items that needed to be dealt with, and so we had to this was one where we needed some encouragement to keep everybody moving, and this is why we see some of the changes that we've mentioned in the subdivision agreement template. But we're pleased today to say that Songbird and Forest View are ready to be assumed. Both ponds have been cleaned out, everything is functioning as expected, drainage is working, etc. So we're looking at this time. We did hold security through the entire exercise, which is another item that has led us to realize there's benefit. If we hold enough money, we can make timelines work for everyone. I'm open to any questions.
Thanks, Christina. Any questions for Christina? Seeing and hearing none. Deputy Mayor Richardson.
Thank you, and through you. Just a quick question. When was that second layer of asphalt put on this subdivision?
I believe 2020, but I should have it in here. Nope, sorry, I'm sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. July 14th and 15th of 2021.
All right, any further questions? If not, what would the committee like to do? Member O'Reilly?
Move the recommendation for Four Winds. I find it's great. Thank you, Christine, for getting that hooked after. It's been an ongoing saga for a number of years. So thanks for that. That's great.
Okay. So that report, ENG 2022-038, Assumption of Four Winds Subdivision Phase 3 Ops be received. That the Assumption of Four Winds Subdivision Phase 3 Geographic Township of Ops, City of Kawartha Lakes be approved. That an assumption bylaw substantially in the form attached as Appendix A to report ENG 2022-038 be approved and adopted by Council, and that the Mayor and City Clerk be authorized to execute any documents and agreements required by the approval of this application. And you'll second that, Deputy Mayor Richardson. Any discussion? Calling the question, all in favor? That carries. Thank you. That brings us to 6.3, ENG 2022-040, Assumption of Woodland Hills Subdivision, Manvers. Christina?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. When we speak of legacy projects, this is certainly a legacy project. While we entered into a subdivision agreement in 2010, this actually predates amalgamation. So this is a very exciting time to the number of staff I have had working under me that have actually worked on this particular subdivision. Yes, and the support. And again, this is, when I say development takes a community to build, there's just no other way around it, because we really need to make sure we're being respectful of the past. We consider what's there now, and then we look at what's coming in the future. And it does take a lot of work. However, with the developer, we were able to, he hired new engineers, we were able to work through all the processes. We met extensively out there to satisfy some of the public's concerns, public works concerns, and I'm very pleased with where this particular Russellwood Avenue is at this point in time. This developer, Mr. Donald Kerr, is active in our community ongoing, has another phase that he's been working on. This was a good lesson for today's standards and what's required in our current community. Any questions?
Any questions? Seeing none, Deputy Mayor Richardson.
I will gladly move this as printed, and thank you.
Okay, so we've got that report ENG 2022-040, assumption of Woodland Hills subdivision Manvers be received, that the assumption of Woodland Hills subdivision geographic township of Manvers, City of Kawartha Lakes be approved, that an assumption bylaw substantially in the form attached as Appendix A to report ENG 2022-040 be approved and adopted by council, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute any documents and agreements required by the approval of this application. Seconder, Mayor Elmsley. Any discussion? Member O'Reilly?
I was just wondering if Christine is still on Mr. Kerr's Christmas card list.
Through you, Mr. Chair, no comment.
If there's no other discussion, calling the question, all in favor? That carries. Thank you. All right, that brings us to 6.4 ENG 2022-041, assumption of Orchard Meadows subdivision ops. Christina.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. This is not so much of a legacy project. We very successfully entered into an agreement on this particular subdivision in 2017. So this is a good news story. We're now at 2022. 5 years would be more what we would like to see for urban. This is a fully urbanized subdivision here just at the north end of Lindsay. It's called the former Township of Ops, but it is at the north end of Lindsay, and it links Angeline to some of the other development that has happened. The Springdale development to the north, which has been ongoing since the 1950s, this actually links into some of that subdivision through this Maloney Street, which is fantastic in terms of some more connectivity, some more looping of our water main, etc. This is also part of two roads, Claxton and Springdale Drive, that will also link in with the ongoing Woods of Jenny's Creek Phase 1 North. So in this entire particular circle of the roads, we have 100 units total. This one was 64 units. They did place the asphalt in July of 2020, the top course, and subsequent to that, there were a few deficiencies found in the underground, so those had to be corrected. Again, I'll go back to some of the conversation we had with respect to the subdivision agreement template. This is part of the reason we're suggesting no top course goes on until absolutely everything is fantastic underground. Again, there are always unforeseen things that do happen, so we have to be respectful of that as well. But at this time, this subdivision is in great shape for assumption, and being here in town, you're more than welcome to drive through. Any questions?
Any questions of Christina, committee? Seeing none, what are your wishes? Mayor Elmsley?
As printed.
All right, so we have a motion that report ENG 2022-041, assumption of Orchard Meadows subdivision ops be received, that the assumption of Orchard Meadows subdivision geographic township of ops, City of Kawartha Lakes be approved, that an assumption bylaw substantially in the form attached as Appendix A to report ENG 2022-041 be approved and adopted by council, and that the mayor and the city clerk be authorized to execute any documents and agreements required by the approval of this application. Seconder for that motion? Member Willick, any discussion? Calling the question, all in favor? That carries. Thank you. That brings us to 6.5, ENG 2022-047, registered subdivision status update. Christina?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Several years ago, we had a meeting here with Planning Committee, it was called, I believe, at the time, and it was discussed that it would be very beneficial to have an update on an annual basis of the registered subdivision agreements. And the registered subdivisions are those for which the lots already exist. So I'm not speaking to those that are under draft plan approval or still in the planning approval stage. So this is a summary that was agreed upon with respect to the subdivision name, and the number of lots was something that was of interest of everybody to have an idea of how many were there and how many had been built upon. And then the general status, where that particular subdivision was at in terms of status. And then we talked about what was required in terms of file numbers and dates. And the one date that was of interest at the time was the actual registration of the agreement. And that will give you some idea of how long some of the developments have been proceeding. We do try to keep this as current as possible. We provide weekly or every other weekly communication on the status of some of the subdivisions that are out there so that our communications team knows what is happening. I will note that I'm excited to say that it did indeed happen, and the Morningside Phase 2 particular subdivision has been registered. It did get registered this month, and the Sugarwood is proceeding in a timely fashion. So it still is anticipated by the end of 2022. I did highlight those for you just because we try to get the reports ready, but we're also trying to be as accurate and current as possible. And again, that holds true for the number of lots, et cetera. We've all been trying to make sure we have the building permits and or go out to site to see if they're being built upon. So I'm open to any questions, and I recognize there are a lot here. I will note that as of this morning, I've been informed that the lots were deemed, it's gone through the Riverside Heights. So now we have lots so it's technically a registered subdivision. It had been deemed, the lots were not in existence. Now the deeming bylaw has been lifted. Now the lots exist. Technically, it needs to be added to my table. So I will add Riverside Heights. That is the extension of Cedar Tree and Hemlock in Bobcaygeon for reference, if that helps.
Mayor Elmsley.
Thank you. I just have questions on Pearson Farms and Pearson Farms G and Matchett. They were registered in 2009 and 2010. We know that there were drainage issues, certainly in part of that, but when I was over there talking to some residents, they have grave concerns about the top course of asphalt not being applied yet. And as they say, it's been 10 years. And I just wondered, what is the plan going forward to make that happen?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. So one of the aspects of this particular update list and how we can actually provide you with some kind of update on what the potential activity would be is to provide an update as a result of our project management with the development teams. We reached out earlier this year to Mr. Stoller for an update on Pearson 4B, the Guy and Matchett situation. We did not hear anything. From our estimation, we are now at the point where we're looking at default for this particular agreement and are currently drafting a legal letter to go out to Mr. Stoller for an update on, our expectation is to get the top course of asphalt on next year, and we still hold security to complete that activity. That was my question.
Any further questions for Christina, Mayor or Member O'Reilly? Just about got a promotion.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. With the pay accordingly, I hope. Anyways, I'll give you a motion to receive the registered subdivision agreement at this time.
Okay, so we have a motion that report ENG 2022-047 registered subdivision status update be received and that staff be directed to continue to provide annual updates for the continued communication process improvement and to support the development community. Seconder for that motion, Mayor Elmsley. Any discussion? Member O'Reilly.
Thank you. Just a quick follow-up on talking about legacy projects. Island View Estates, Verlam Township, amending agreement pending. Would you like to expand on that, Richard?
Certainly through the chair. That is a subdivision that truly gives on giving. So we have an amending agreement ready, and we've settled on that. They're also trying to put together a plan of condominium for the common element docking area. When they've moved the property to titles absolute, they got some concerns raised by some of the landowners over the boundaries, and so they've had to deal with some of those concerns. They also found that there was a water lot on the bottom of the lake bed that nobody knew about, and so they're having to deal with that issue now as well. So what they need to now do is they've applied to get an easement over top of that for the docks that they want to install. So this project has gone through a number of different curves and twists and so on and so forth. I think we're getting close because this amending agreement, I think, was before planning committee. I think last year or the year before, I can't quite recall. But it's been some time, but I think we're getting close. The good news is they've managed to buy out all the lot owners to consolidate all of the lots. I think there's only two lots that they don't own, and they're making agreements with them to allow them into the condominium, into the common area. So I keep joking with them, the longer that this goes on, you might own all the lots. But the good news is we won't have any people that are going to be locked out of the condo corporation. So at the end of the day, everybody is going to have access to the waterfront there. So I'm thinking it'll probably thinking Q2 of next year for signing on that one. So.
I think, Mr. Chair, just Bob, is our best guess who owns the newfound lot? Is that the municipality, or is that?
It's a private landowner. It's not either Transeverin or the city. I think there's a barge that's parked over top of it or something like that, from what I understand. So it's a private landowner that simply was able to register an R plan, and it was accepted. So.
Any further discussion? Calling the question, all in favor? That carries. Thank you. Item 6.6, ENG 2022-048, Municipal Infrastructure Design Guidelines Annual Update. Christina?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. This is a commitment that we made to the municipality when we had council-approved municipal infrastructure guidelines, that we would come forward on an annual basis to provide updates. These updates require us to take a look at what the Ontario provincial standards are showing, keep up to date with what is happening with the Ministry of Environment. We also take in any commentary from Public Works, Parks and Recreation, any of our internal groups and agencies that might touch our infrastructure in some way, shape, or form, to make sure that we are accommodating everything that is being expected. It's also our opportunity to take into account any commentary coming in from the development consultants, where there may be confusion, as we all recognize, whether we use words, pictures, or drawings, or, formulas. Sometimes people we don't all have the same definition or clarity on that particular subject matter. So it's also an opportunity for us to converse with the teams that we work with on a regular basis to make sure that everything meets with what their expectations are. So as a result, we do have updates on we pretty well bring an update every year. We talked about the consolidated linear infrastructure earlier. That is one of the items, is the ministry has published now a final set of documents that says this is how they want the infrastructure to be designed for us to be able to complete our part of the environmental compliance approval. So we would like to have permission to put that on our website to make sure that everybody understands by what rules of engagement are we going to develop in our community. Subsequent to that as well, there's been a slight confusion, and it's between subdivisions and site plans, where we've had some confusion by some engineering consultants. I don't think so much on the planning side, but Richard can step in if he believes that there has been some challenge there. When it comes to private property, the Ontario Building Code governs that servicing. When you're on municipal property, then our guidelines, the ministry guidelines, they prevail. And what's happened is, in an effort to design their individual sites, some consultants have taken it upon themselves to apply our guidelines for municipal infrastructure on private infrastructure on private property. We went back and read, and of course, if you're part of the drafting team of everything, you believe it's clear as the day. However, today was very cloudy and rainy and windy, and clearly that's what's happened, is there's been some swing towards, if these are easier to interpret potentially, I'm not sure, they've taken that as being their guidance to use. And so we've gone back in and changed our wording and tried to make sure that nobody misunderstands or misdirects. There's no need within the municipality to have the building division and the engineering division trying to figure out where do we start and stop. It's very clear, and it's legally binding where that property line is. So we had to do some clarification on the wording there in the water guidelines, but it was also quite extensive. We have very robust stormwater management guidelines, and I think in lieu of the Conservation Authority having anything, in lieu of there being another guiding document that people could reach for, I think they've used ours to kind of bolster it. And in looking back at it, we did have some references to site plans in there. I don't think that's the bad thing. Quality and quantity control are just as important on private property as public. It's not the same difference on the stormwater with respect to private and public property lines. So it's not, I can't draw the line as clearly. So we've massaged the wording to suggest it's a guiding document there. It doesn't mean that that's the only, reference that you can do. And again, I think we all recognize on smaller parcels of private property where they're, endeavoring to get a commercial development established, I don't know if you want to take us to the same standard that we all have to have for our road design and massive subdivisions. So it's, again, about clarity of language. Clearly I like my words, but we're making sure that we're trying to get that message across. We also had a couple of little tweaks where we've had some situations with a 75 millimeter diameter in the water. We're making sure that we're trying to, again, before somebody starts the work, there's no go zones for the municipality. So we want to be a lot more clear about that. And we've also, something that's not on your report that we've had to add in the sanitary guidelines, we're now going to require the camera work. So they send a camera in through the pipe system network to make sure everything is good to go. We're now requiring that camera work for sanitary sewer laterals as well. Not just the main infrastructure, but the individual lateral work as well. I hinted earlier, we've had some situations in the past. We need to make sure that that doesn't happen elsewhere. And for the most part, we did have to reference the 4.5% DAP that we talked about earlier. Again, I'm open to any questions or comments on this particular subject matter.
Any questions of Christina at this time? Okay, seeing and hearing none, what would committee like to do? Member Barkwell?
That's the report ENG 2022-048 Municipal Infrastructure Design Guidelines be received, and that staff be directed to continue to update and to add to the information available on the city's website, including templates and details to facilitate engineering design submissions for development, and that staff be directed to continue to monitor for any communication improvements and for any current legislation or regulatory enhancements requiring updates to the existing guidelines on the city website.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that motion? Member Willock. Any discussion? Calling the question. All in favor? That carries. And that brings us down to our last item of business today, item 7. Who needs an alibi? Motion for adjournment, Member Willock, seconded by Mayor Elmsley. Thank you for your time, everyone.